Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers Music Podcast, where a group of friends gather together to share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. Fun time had by all. I'm Petey Rave, and here with me is my triumvirate, my friends, my gang, my crew. We've got David Majors, aka DJM.
Buenos tacos, muchachos. I hope you did something nice for yourself today.
And we have Drew Snyder all the way at the end.
I didn't. I went to an interview and then had panic problems all day because anxiety is awesome. But I am drinking the Kool-Aid, so.
We're here to talk about music. We're here to talk about an album. And the provider of the album is me. And I brought a group from my neck of the woods, South Florida's own band that I was looking at, like I mentioned last episode, I was looking at a thread asking about recommendations for local bands in r/Miami of all places. And several bands that I've noted and I have in the chamber for in the future. But one of them was mentioned a couple times, and I've seen them talk about elsewhere. And that is a group known as Palomino Blond, and their only album that they have out so far. Mostly they have singles and EPs. The only album they have out so far, On the Inside. Let's David, what were your expectations coming into this album?
See, you're asking that question and giggling about it. One, because you know I hate that question. And two, we were all kind of coming into this blind because it was introduced by you as a local act, Petey. So I know that you often tend to have a very diverse palette musically. And I usually kind of go in blind on purpose. And that's kind of how I operate. I don't Google or look up anything until I'm already listening to the album.
Drew, what were your expectations? What was your approach coming into this album?
So seeing the album cover, I was like, oh, this is sort of the old school aesthetic. The vaporwave, retrowave thing has been big in music for a while. Maybe that. You said it was a local act, so I was like, maybe it's something with like that, like Florida vibe. You sometimes get like the Cuban influence from that, so maybe something in that realm. But Miami is also known for like the very boisterous music. I mean, Dale and all that. So like, could have been that. I really had no idea. There was like David said, you have a diverse musical palette, and all I knew was it's from Florida, which there's a lot of weird music that comes out of Florida. The Less Than Jake, I think, is Floridian, correct? Yeah, Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah.
Gainesville, Rock City. But so it could have been anywhere. I don't think I expected where it ended up, but we'll get into that.
Well, yes. Musically, this is we described this album music, and musically, this is very like 90s grunge, college rock, college radio sound, very like guitar heavy, very crunchy, very like a bit of like I guess I'm not sure if I'll use the term right, but like kind of wall of sound-ish, maybe but like very alternative, like what people would talk about when they would talk about alternative, and there's like a lot of sounds.
Here's what I wrote in my notes, Petey. It felt like it was alternative before alt became a thing.
Yeah. And back when it was 94.9 Zeta, South Florida's alternative,
89X, Detroit and Windsor's new rock alternative.
And it mixes a couple of like different things, as often will be done when you're pulling kind of from the past, as you kind of pull where in the moment there are different groups during branching out different sounds. When you pull back, you tend to grab from all of those groups. So like it has like the bigger moments of like the big rock bands, but it also has the kind of like moodier moments and like pseudo shoegazy moments of like the garage like college radio garage rock bands, and it's cool. It's a mood, if you will. It's a mood, and it's definitely feels like it's built perfectly to be enjoyed by millennials trying to go on a night out. But I think it has a great sound and a great feel. David, how would you describe this album musically?
I would describe this album as very throwback college rock. It really caught me off guard to see that this album was made in 2021, because it is so authentic to that sound, whether it was like college radio or alternative radio before alt became a thing or alternative became mainstream. It's very much in that vein, and it's very authentic too, especially given that it was made in 2021. It definitely has a little flashes of early 2000s production as well. The snare drum is really good. The guitars are not overpowering, but they're there. And it felt in a good way like the scene from a 90s indie film, or maybe early 2000s, but not in a bad way by any means. Actually complimentary. I'd say that a lot about a couple of different songs, that it has that indie film energy, that classic indie rock vibe, but I mean that complimentary.
Yeah, like a 90s indie rock or a 90s slacker movie, like a something with John Cusack back in the 90s. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
The late 80s emo, early 90s vibe to this is out in spades. It is the right amount of like weird shoegazy, pretty melancholy without being sort of up its own ass with the Charlie Brown stare at the feet shoegazy thing that happens sometimes within the genre. The vocals to me are a highlight. To me, the coolest stuff in this sort of feel either comes from being like anything that sort of goes in a milieu of sort of like that emo side of things. You either have to, for me, have to go in on the more like raucous, like punk rock side of it, or you have to have something very pretty on top of everything. And the vocals, the vocal melodies, the vocal runs, the production, like David said, like all create this very pretty upper that like then lets the mid play sometimes in like very overdriven, crunchy, like mid-tempo, like greatness there. And it's just the right amount of overdriven, like high gain sort of crunch without going into like the sort of almost ridiculous, like chugga drop tuning that some of the like late 90s, early aughts, like hardcore overdriven stuff got into. There's walls of sound in here that really, really hit well to me. David's right. It feels like it came from a time before, when alternative radio was alternative radio and not alt rock radio. This band sort of fits that milieu, like right between like the not Bright. Who's the band? Is it Bleach? A Dozen Roses. A Dozen Roses is the album I'm thinking of. Yeah. Dozen Roses in the car. I think it's Bleach. I'll double check that in a moment, so I'm not pounding keys, no microphone. But like between that, Nirvana and REM was like this milieu, and it's great.
Yeah. And it fits a really, really fantastic sound. And as we get to like as we get into the tracks and the key tracks and the key moments, we get into a couple of songs that I want to highlight. There's not a lot of them. It's a very short album. It's only like 26 minutes and only a few tracks, but I'll highlight a couple of the ones, which is Phoebe has this really great like opening riff and like the guitar riff and like the pace of it is really cool, and like it I think the opening is a nice like opening, kind of gets you introduces it and like brings you into the album, but I think this one kind of like kicks it into a good gear going forward from there to the rest of the album. Stone has a kind of like almost like a nice like launching anthemic feel for being like a very grungy song. You know, the hook is really cool, and the vocals are just really fantastic. The female vocals are really fantastic because there's two vocalists that are the two kind of like creative forces behind the album, and this one kind of is a really, really fun highlight. And Lovely, I think Lovely is where I really kind of got that like nostalgic and very familiar like 90s song, like 90s sound from especially like the very college radio, very college rock like harmonized vocals from the male side of it, and then it kind of like transitions to the feminine vocals, and it kind of like launches off into a great finish, and it's just all of it kind of like tickles particular authentic classic sounds, which are really, really great. David, what will be some of the key tracks for you?
Like you said, track 2, Phoebe. It invoked a little bit of grunge, but without being too dark and broody. And again, I had to ask myself, was this really made in 2021? I will say also 3 tracks, Magnolia, Stone, and Lovely. They ran together for me, but they ran together in a good way. The flow of the album is very, very good. Mm-hmm. And Ultraviolet kind of brought back the dynamics that this band had, where they described themselves as pretty but also scary. I think you hear that on Ultraviolet. There's some dynamics going on there.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Well, you knew it was going to happen. It's a song that is the album title and also the first song. But like the slow building, the drums, the pretty vocals, from the jump, this album like sat in that like relaxing / morose pocket that's really, really fun to just like sit back and let wash over you. The wall of sound in Magnolia was the perfect hit without being super annoying. And then it ends on the most soft, gentle letdown in Secrets, which I think was just a great way to sort of like a good emo song and a good emo album to me has like a peak and then like sort of drops down and should leave you sort of not relaxed is the wrong word, but understanding and content with what's going on. If still a little unhappy, and I feel like that happens here on a whole album standpoint, which I think is really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let's bring it back around the horn, talk about some conclusions. David, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
First of all, I will say that in my notes, I wrote the phrase, not in a bad way, 4 different times. I gave this album a few different listens because in the last week or so, I was actually dealing with an ear infection. So I had to really clue in and listen on it. There is a timeless quality to this album of a very specific time. It would have fit in perfectly in the 90s, and that's great. I will say that the album was solid, adequate. You hear bands and you hear fans of bands like this, and just in this kind of genre and space, talk about how albums don't sound good and how their early works don't sound good. And I will give Palomino Blond a lot of credit for this album not sounding like it was recorded in a gas station on a Fisher-Price recorder. Mm-hmm. That might take away a couple of the 90s points if you're really keeping score. But yeah. Also, like, sonically very good. Sonically very good. I would say overall this is a fine album. It was solid. It didn't really blow me away or give me any like, oh crap moments, but it was solid. It was consistent. It was well written. It was well produced. It had an energy. It had a vision. It had a direction. And I think they executed it well. So my general feeling on the album is that it was perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm. Drew, how would you conclude on this album as a whole?
Well, the first thing I'll say is Braid, A Dozen Roses is the song I was thinking of. Okay. So if you have a chance, go back and listen to that and you'll maybe get what I'm saying about that. It is fucking early emo to the max. But that being said, David's right. The production quality on this album is phenomenal, especially for a first album, for an early album. I sometimes will harp on things that sometimes feel too polished, or like they were in the studio just trying to make a very specific thing and not just letting it happen, and it feeling overdone, and you sort of getting that feeling from the record. This is a masterclass in how to polish a record and make it sonically sound amazing without having it be overdone. And that is not easy with the sort of wall of sound, sort of overdriven guitars they were using at times, with the sort of very center channel. It felt like a lot of this was very center, which can also make it hard to mix without it sounding muddy or overdone, which again, these are things that sort of are getting better and better and more understood the more people that have access to the tools now that it's not only a rich man's game to do audio production, like it was in the 80s and 90s. That said, I'm going to say I am very different musically from David. I think this is one of the best things that I've listened to. I won't say one of the best things. Let me take that back. I will say this is one of my favorite things that I've listened to on this podcast, full stop. It's a very different thing sonically from Bad Rabbits, but like, as you'll see in my haiku, like they're in that echelon of like, damn, like I am going to keep my eyes on these guys. Mm-hmm. Like this is a band that like sits in a lot of my pockets of like, oh, I loved like 80s and early 90s emo. I loved I shouldn't say love. I like a lot of the grunge stuff. Like I'm one of the guys that's like, there should be more praise on Mudhoney like you give Pearl Jam and Nirvana, you assholes. Like I'm that guy. Like, because of course I am. I'm the hipster. But
I was always more of an Alice in Chains guy.
Alice in Chains too. But I think Alice in Chains gets a lot of respect, where I feel like Mudhoney like sort of is like the 5th or 6th on people's list. I'm like, come on, they should be up there. Like they should be in league with them. I'm getting too far into the weeds now on like 90s grunge. And this is one of those bands that like, yes, they have like this older sound. And yes, they do feel very in that pocket, but there are bands I feel like that can be interesting while still mining those depths using what we now understand about production and mixing and song creation within those genres. Because music is always evolving. So sometimes going back to that well, you can find new water.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really cool about what's going on with this album and with the group overall. It is like David has said, very authentic twist on a very familiar sound for some of us, a very like nostalgic sound. It is well made, but while still being like organic in a lot of ways. It is very very cool, very well made, and very fun, and I think shows a lot of promise for what the band can do going forward. They've got a couple of the singles. They just last year they released a really cool song called Machine, which has a video which everyone should check out, and hopefully they're going to be releasing more songs soon, and they're often touring and doing really cool stuff.
Best of luck to them.
Mm-hmm. And I think this shows a promise, and this gets me excited for this project that I'm starting of diving myself into my local scene and dragging the guys with me. So and I'm looking forward to where we're gonna find, because I think this is something that shows a lot of promise and shows a really great personality and sound, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing them continue to grow, as it seems like they are getting at least a couple of like mentions here and there. I Google them and they're getting articles here and there, but they're still out there trying to grind. So I look forward to where they can take their sound and their identity and their career from here. and this shows a lot of promise. Yeah. Those are our thoughts on Palomino Blonde's On the Inside. Now we get to the main event of the evening, the one we've all been waiting for, our haiku reviews, where we sum it all up in poetic form with the 575. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Haikumero numero uno. Surprised HQ hasn't come after me. I guess. I mean, they're dead, so it doesn't matter. David, what is your haiku?
My haiku. Throwback indie vibe. Brief moments of atmosphere. Satisfactory.
Yeah. Drew, what is your haiku?
The best sounding band that we have done on this show. Bad Rabbits level.
And my haiku. Crunchy and grungy with a nostalgic soundscape, keeping eyes on them. And yeah, those are our thoughts on Palomino Blonde. Very well worth checking out. They will be on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, a home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. They'll be on our Spotify playlist and our YouTube playlist. Listen along with us at home. On those playlists will be next week's record, and it's going to be provided by David. David, what have you got in store for us?
The year is 1976. This band has lost their super famous, super popular lead singer after their 1975 double album. And to be honest, it was time for both of them to part ways. But strangely enough, when this band was looking for their replacement singer, he was in the band all along, and it was their drummer. And I'm talking about their first album with their drummer / vocalist from 1976. Oh yes, we are finally doing a Genesis album, and it is 1976's Trick of the Tail.
Looking forward to that. But yeah, that'll be next week, and this is This Week, and you can of course find us all over the internet. Recordbreakers.fun for the show notes and the episodes, rebelli.net for this and our other shows, Rebelli TV on YouTube and on Twitch. You can watch the recorded episodes and all of our recorded VODs for our streams on YouTube. And you can watch us live, watch us record Record Breakers live, watch us do Through the Tomes, our TTRPG show live, as well as our GM mode stream, and a whole lot of fun stuff. So follow us over there. Yeah, and do all the things. Find us everywhere you find podcasts. I don't have I don't want to dare guess the list at this point because I don't know how many places still have podcast places, but I think at least Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts, and just grab the RSS feed on our website if anything. But yeah, like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.
Oh, bye-bye.
Annyeong. Fighting.
Crying nut.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.